Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I can read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Welcome to another episode of Ken Reads, where today I'm going to be reading out Fiona's letter very shortly with my colleague Megan. So I'm just going to bring Megan on board now and let's just say relatable and often have a lot of signs of avoidance stuff going on. Hey Megan, how are you?
Hi, Ken. I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. Just before we get into Fiona's letter, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself for everyone?
Yes, absolutely. So hello, everybody who is joining for the live and for those who will be watching or listening later. My name is Megan Brito. I am a team member with Ken and Ken Read Counseling. I am a coach with Ken, so I support people who have just experienced a pretty traumatic ending or a breakup, and are coming off the back of these experiences and are wanting some help to just process the relationship and the grief and the betrayal that can be coming up. I also help individuals heal their own insecure attachment styles. And I also can support folks if their previous partner that they've broken up with struggled with an addiction of some kind, that's including things like gambling addictions or sex and pornography addictions. I can support with that as well. So those are some of the things I support folks with as a coach with Ken. And I also work full-time as a registered social worker with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. And I provide addiction counseling to folks in my community in rural southwestern Ontario. And there I specialize in behavior addictions. And I've also worked in the field of domestic violence for a number of years too. So some of those elements that we can see come up in these relationships and the breakups that sometimes can be abusive, I also can highlight and support folks with that as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate you introducing yourself, because I think that a lot of what you do in your own work outside of our time together relates heavily to the stuff that we talk about. So I think it's appropriate to talk about it because a lot of this stuff has intersectionality. All right, let's get into Fiona's letter. So Fiona writes, "Hi Ken," and as we usually do, because this letter's on the lengthier side, which a lot of them are these days, and that's fine, we will try and pause as we go through just to break parts of what Fiona says, unpack a bit, and we'll keep going until the very end. All right, so let us go through Fiona's letter. She writes, "Hi Ken,
First, thanks for the opportunity and for sharing your knowledge. I tried to make this letter short, but couldn't do more, so sorry for the length. Nah, it's totally fine, Fiona. My story is a bit out of the ordinary. I am married and in an open relationship. I mention this to provide context to the nature of my relationship with George, who I suspect is a dismissive avoidant. There were no expectations of a future, and it was mostly a long-distance online dynamic that went on for 3 years. However, I perceived it to be an intimate relationship for both of us. George and I lived in different cities and met at a work event we both traveled to. It was intense, immediate chemistry. He said he was a bit shy, but pursued me heavily and seemed determined in how attached he was to me. However, I was dealing with other things in my life, so I rejected him, even though I was also very attracted to him. Eventually, we started to work together, spending a lot of time on the phone, video calls. My feelings started to grow, getting to know him and trust him. We had chemistry, shared things about our lives, and he seemed to enjoy and seek my presence. We were becoming friends. A year after we met, he quit the job he worked at. We continued texting and calling regularly. And when COVID started, he began to flirt and open up more about his own life, but we never spoke more about our first encounter. I was aware of our incompatibilities. He'd said he'd had some relationships when he was younger, but he'd also admitted that he'd cheated. Never had he had a serious relationship or wanted one, but he did claim that he did want to have one in the future. And didn't like any long distances he didn't like any long distance relationships, but he often found himself attracted to women who at some point would leave. I knew any relationship between us had an end date, as there were things he wanted that I couldn't offer, but I was curious and wanted to explore our connection. When I started to be more forward, he said, "We're just friends, we shouldn't force things," which confused me given how he'd behaved so far, so I pulled back. I don't enjoy the chase of people who don't like me. A couple of weeks later, he asked me why I rejected him when we first met and said he still thought about our connection. We started to be intimate over video and continued talking. Sorry, my brain just flipped. Sorry, my brain just did something really whack there. That doesn't usually happen. I don't enjoy the chase of people. We started to be intimate over video and continued talking, but after a couple of months, he ghosted me. I was crushed at the sudden change again, but gave him space. I eventually reached out to clear the air. He apologized, said he'd gotten confused and didn't know how to go back to being friends, to which I agreed. We continued to chat, call for the next 2 years and met in person once, where he made it clear he saw me as a friend. So I set internal boundaries for myself as I was still attracted to him. Okay, let's pause there. Already in like a very short span of time, a lot's happened. Megan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree. A lot has happened. You said it well. A lot has happened within a really short span of time. And from George, from him, I hear a lot of just the push-pull of, being in this long-distance relationship. It's a relationship. I'm still connecting with somebody, but because I'm not physically there, I don't have to make this commitment to, see them often. Those long distance relationships, those have a different dynamic. Those have, say, a bit of a different vibe than if we're seeing somebody in person regularly. We can have that space. And folks that have either a dismissive avoidant attachment style or a dismissive leaning fearful avoidant attachment style, they can really enjoy the distance in a relationship because it means they don't have to get as vulnerable or as connected or as committed. They don't have to think about, oh, am I going to have to move in, or I'm going to have to meet family, of the person I'm seeing. Am I going to have to, to try and have all these expectations I'm going to try to meet where they already feel like it's not going to go well anyway. So I think that space and that push-pull of just sending those mixed messages, to me, those are some flags that are coming up of this person sounds like they probably are dismissive avoidant. I don't really hear a lot of volatility or a lot of spiciness that we may hear with somebody that's fearful avoidant. But I also don't hear any communication of how they're feeling, of how they're exploring their internal world and those feelings. That's also something that's really common with folks that are dismissive avoidant. They have feelings, but they're not in touch with them. So those are some things for me that have kind of, helped me come to a conclusion that they're probably someone who has a dismissive avoidant attachment style.
I would agree. And I also think too, his relationship history isn't particularly like, it's not exactly stuff that would provide confidence for someone if they were listening to it. I mean, he's had no committed relationships, and in that by itself is not always a deal breaker in my opinion, but on this occasion there's a few other things that are going on too. Like, it seems like people have historically left him. He's also had no committed relationships. He's also telling you that when you get close, oh, we're just friends, even though he was also pursuing you relentlessly throughout this entire period. And I feel like for you, Fiona, to your credit, I think you definitely had your wits about you, that you were like, I don't know if I'm going to really get my needs met here. But in saying that, I worry for you, Fiona, that there was something obviously here. There was something in this connection that kept you engaged with George, to the point where even in spite of some of these perhaps seeming incompatibilities that you had, that you still felt like, I want to see where this goes and where this could potentially, where this could lead in the future as well too. Because I think what's really quite disarming about this is the fact that there was quite a heavy hot period for quite a while before there was ghosting, and then a period where you'd only hang out like once a year. Like, I mean, that's not a relationship. At that stage, that's barely even an acquaintance. That's like the sort of once in a blue moon person you catch up with every now and then, when it's like, oh yeah, I guess we can catch up. Like, I mean, I could imagine if you were in this relationship of sorts, that would be hell, because you're basically just being, you're basically just waiting on the other person to agree to see you whenever they want. And I also think because this is an open relationship, even if it may have felt comfy at first, that's still too much space for any kind of polyamorous relationship.
Yeah, I was going to say that also, yeah, that's something that also, like, I kind of perked up about those two things, and you said them so well. That to like is what kind of relationship is this? Like, what are these defining grounds? And it's also, Fiona, I know neither of us are saying that to invalidate how you felt about this person, right? Also talking about you, like you said, I felt like I was connecting to him. There was a feeling of feeling good, feeling loved, feeling seen. That's what I'm hearing as to why you also wanted to continue to stay, to try to make this this bond, this connection work. But for him, and even though you're long distance, there are still expectations of what communication looks like and what those regular interactions look like. And yeah, he just kind of, again, what I heard was, I'm going to connect when I feel like it. I'm not going to put any effort in. And something else. Oh yeah, go on.
I was going to interrupt quickly and say, it's clearly effort on his terms. When he wants, like, if he's feeling like pursuing you, it's probably because you at a distance is attractive, but you up close, too much, too scary.
Mm-hmm. It's controlling this space in the relationship. He has an upper hand with that, and he's doing that because he's deciding how much. So that space of, literally, we are long distance, but also when I get to connect, how we're connecting, what am I talking about, how often am I seeing you, because that makes him feel safe. The more distance, the more space is what feels safe to him, feels calming to his nervous system. And if you had to get closer to him physically, or again, more time physically together, even just more time connecting, and maybe even getting deeper with the conversations, really getting vulnerable and intimate, and really getting to know him and him getting to know you, he's probably not going to be okay with that. He's not going to feel comfortable with it. So he is leading the relationship. He's deciding what that dynamic looks like. And also, and Ken, please correct me if I misheard, but I think it was mentioned in the letter that George said that I actually get really attracted to women who don't have much interest in me, or when women start to leave or pull away. Did I understand that correctly?
I don't believe that was something that I said or read out, but I mean, oh, hang on. No, what was said, I think, was Fiona said, I don't enjoy the chase of people who don't like me. What George had said was,
okay,
we're friends, we shouldn't force things. But maybe I'm, ignoring a part that was here. Maybe it's something that's future, it's being talked about later on, but that's what I remember from this too. But in saying that, I do suppose there is a bit of relevance, because sometimes avoidance will say that they do prefer to chase people as well too. So, that can be a thing. But from this account, I don't think I saw that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think also when I heard that too, I don't really take much interest unless people chase me. And I think hearing that, Fiona, I think because in the letter you asked, like, what do I need to do moving forward? And this is like, right, just kind of some like gentle, constructive feedback, what you can do to help move forward. When we are in a place of security, we don't look for people to chase us. We don't look to be chased. We look to mutually connect. We put just as much effort in. And if someone is chasing us, that's a wound that's can be a wound of us not being seen or enjoyed, or we refer to it as being taken delight in. Somebody just not wanting to get to know us as children, and we just feel really unloved and unseen. So as adults, we get this, it's like, it feels like a spark, or feels like an intensity, or maybe this relationship is worth it if somebody chases me. And those healthier relationships, we don't chase. We show curiosity, we want to connect, there's interest, but there's no chasing. So that's something that you can take moving forward into future relationships that you do form.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think, in terms of, how Fiona's handled this, like, to your credit, Fiona, I think you obviously sound like you've had plenty of relationship history. You wouldn't have said that if you don't sound like you're a stranger to the games that people play in dating, if you will. Like, you're obviously no stranger to, BS behavior. But I think what's really scary about this is it's like, obviously, the intensity of meeting George, his pursuit of you, and then going cold, obviously threw you for a bit of a loop. And I agree with you, Megan. I think this is, so far from this reading, it's seeming like we're in dismissive avoidant territory. Nice, spacious, open relationship that's long distance. To me, one question I have is, like, who the hell decided on this relationship dynamic? Like, I almost wonder, did both of you sit down and have a conversation around this and decide, like, how this was going to be? Like, I'm almost wondering, like, how did we agree to this decision in the first place? And I want to make it very clear, I am not against people having open relationships or any, ethical non-monogamous style relationship. I don't particularly mind. But to me, this just seems to be working out for one of you.
I was going to say, that's what I heard too. And exactly, Ken, it's not about, it has nothing to do with you being in an open relationship. It's like, who decided the dynamic of the relationship? How did that come to be? And another thing too is that this is also, like, going back to Ken's point a couple moments ago of, open distance, open relationship, like open space in the relationship, lots of distance, I could do whatever I want. And then I also want to say, we're just friends. This wasn't a relationship. Yeah. What are you talking about? Like, those are also really common phrases that we hear with somebody who tends to lead their dismissive avoidant, or again, dismissive leading fearful avoidant, is like, this wasn't a relationship. What are you talking about? And that goes back to, if they have to acknowledge or put a label on things, or even just admit their feelings, that's a very, very vulnerable thing to do for anybody.
Yes.
And they don't handle vulnerability well. That's an emotion that's very raw for us, right? We feel very raw and exposed when we have to be vulnerable. It's something that is healthy. It's uncomfortable sometimes, but it's something that we need to do that's healthy, and we need to do that with people that are trustworthy and respectful. But that's a no-go for anybody. So even just hearing him say, we're just friends, even if the dynamic, like, again, so yeah, that question is who decided the status in the relationship, but also hearing him say we're just friends is him it really does sound like it's him avoiding his feelings. It's him avoiding wanting to put a label on something because that is just too much for him. That's, oh God, I'm responsible to somebody. I feel things. What if they leave me? I'm not going to be enough for them. I'm defective in some way. Those are some, I'm defective. That's a big core wound for somebody who has a dismissive avoidant attachment style. So like that's, so again, it's like kind of this, I don't want to phrase it as an ambiguity in the relationship. It's just, I think there's some parts that are missing, but really hearing him say this, we're just friends. I do hear that as an attachment wound coming up that's getting in the way of how he's actually feeling.
I completely agree with you. So let's continue with Fiona's letter. I think there's, like we said, there's a lot that's come out of this already in the beginning part of this too. So, let's see, we've done that part. We continued to chat and call for the next 2 years and met in person once, which I know I already read out, but I'm just going back through it, where he made it clear he saw me as a friend, so I set internal boundaries for myself as I was still attracted to him. Good on you.
Yes.
A year after this meeting, during a catch-up call, he asked me if I thought he was a bad communicator and said he owed me an explanation. That when he said he was only saw me as a friend, it wasn't definitive. Oh.
Okay.
That he knew he'd get confused at times and gave the impression of being aloof and vague. I told him that I thought he was inconsistent and I didn't want to guess what he wanted, so he had to communicate with me. He said he didn't want to close the door on us. We had a long conversation about what we wanted and discussed how to build a relationship dynamic that worked for us, where we could be caring, respectful, communicative, while having good fun and keeping the door open for each other. I believed him. We had sex. Afterwards, he joked that we'd made progress and asked me if I was happy. I was. He said he dated other people, we'd had space, and now he was taking the initiative, so it felt safe that he'd done some introspection for himself. Over the next couple of months, he was consistent in showing interest until I felt his energy pull back. Ah, yes, here we go. One day I texted and said he could only be friends now as he was seeing someone. He said he could only be friends now as he was seeing someone. I got anxious and asked him if we could talk things properly instead of texting. He responded, "Is there something you want to discuss?" He agreed to call, but was emotionless and cold. I told him I knew he was dating and it was part of the deal, but I needed him to communicate with me because I felt he was treating me like shit. He got offended, asking me why I would say that we only had video sex, that other girls didn't complain. I was too emotional, I was crying, and he didn't like to see me like this. He didn't want to cause trouble, so he decided we'd be friends. He said, I don't know if my relationships will last. I asked him what I was supposed to do. He recognized I couldn't wait. He asked me if I had feelings for him. I said that I never asked him for anything he couldn't offer and that I knew the limitations of our relationship. And even though it was true, but I recognize now I was afraid of scaring him with how I felt and not telling him what was coming up for me. We hung up with nothing decided, but I asked him if we could talk later down the line. I texted him a couple of days later, apologizing for parts of my reaction, but not for being emotional. I left the door open for him to respond. He said, "Your points are very valid. Sorry if I caused any harm." That's the last thing he said to me, and he basically disappeared from my life. Holy fucking shit. Okay, there is a bit more with what is written, but I think we just need to take a moment to unpack the shit fuckery of all of that nonsense. Okay, so just to get my 2 cents out of the way, because I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this, Megan. It's interesting to me how when we were last talking, Megan, about, you know, him defining the relation. Well, we actually don't know who defined what with this relationship. Yeah. He's inconsistently talked about like, oh, we're friends. But it's interesting how he came back later down the line to be like, oh, well, that's not definitive. It just goes to show that he's so about controlling the narrative of this entire thing. Mm-hmm. And even though this is an open relationship, he treats you at one moment like you're really special, but then later goes on to date someone new saying, oh, now we have to be friends. It's like, but bro, we're in an open relationship. It's like, you know, of course you're allowed to date someone. That's part of the arrangement. But it's interesting how he's just calling the shots throughout this entire thing. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, so I myself, I've never had an open relationship. For me, that's not like something I have like particular interest in, but I can imagine if that was something like if I was in an open relationship and so I'm having multiple partners and I'm dating somebody, that's, if that's how I have relationships. And, if I can date many people, you can date many people too, because that's what I'm hearing from Fiona. And then, but for him, it's like one-sided. It's, well, I'll date you, but once I'm done with you, I'm only going to date one partner, like one person at a time. So I'm like, quote unquote, done with you, Fiona, and I've moved on to somebody else. And I hear that as like, I'm just trying to find the words for it. It's like, just me hearing it, it's like he took this polyamorous relationship that you're in, Fiona, and really, like, he just really abused that. He really manipulated it. And it's almost like, and I don't think it was, I'm not saying it's okay, I don't think it was intentional, but it was a little bit of like, hey, there's this level of openness, I can have my cake and eat it too. And when I'm done in this relationship, I'm just going to move on to somebody else. And I'm not going to allow Fiona the ability to have that conversation with me to say, you can date me and date somebody else, because that's not what he wants. And so I really see him abusing and harming that sanctity
Yes.
of what polyamorous relationships are. When they're healthy and they're done well, there's a lot of vulnerability with each partner. You have to be able to set boundaries with each partner. You have to be able to be open and connected and vulnerable with each partner. And he can't do that. And he just, he did whatever he wanted with it. And it's insulting. It's insulting to that experience for you, Fiona. Like, I'm mad for you. I am so mad for you for this. That it's insulting. It really is.
I completely agree. Quick thing though, and this is just this isn't really about the relationship, but actually just more as a question. Correct me if I'm wrong. Open relationships and polyamory are not the same thing, though, are they?
I will be honest, Ken. So also context. I'm not terribly seasoned in open relationships, polyamorous relationships, because there's a lot of parts to them. There's different ways you can categorize partners, and like there's a primary one and there's like secondary ones. So I am ignorant to this. I am trying to learn more about it because, we have people that do engage in polyamorous relationships that can do it, ethically and are everybody's consenting to this. So I don't know. I actually don't know if there is a difference between open relationships and polyamory. If somebody in the comments, if somebody watching this can explain that better, please do. Like, someone just put something in the comments, that would be really helpful. Or even after, like in the video, if you want to comment on it, because I'm not an expert, and I will admit that.
Yeah, because the way I've always thought about it was they were two distinctive things that there might be overlap with. And I was going to say, that wasn't really more of a call out to you, because I know I used the word polyamory before too, and I've accidentally used the two interchangeably. But I think, but what I was going to say is, I think with Fiona, because she specifically said open relationship, my brain went, I'm going to go back to open relationship because I don't want to make out like this is a polyamorous situation when it's in fact not. But anyway, glad we touched on that, because I was like, wait a second, I'm pretty confident we should probably get our facts checked with that one just for a hot second there too. But circling back to what you were saying before, no, I'm angry on Fiona's behalf too, because it's not fair. It's like, you guys have clearly agreed to this open relationship where, even if you're having video sex, even if, you're deciding that you're going to see multiple partners, what I find really obnoxious about this is that he's a terrible participant in this experience. Like, I mean, it's like, bro, you can't be in an open relationship like this where you're treating it like, on one hand, like, Fiona's a friend one minute, then she's a monogamous partner the next. It's like, that's not how this works. You need to communicate better, and you can't be controlling the narrative of what we are and what we're not. And I go back to what I said before. It's like, it's just wild that he's like, oh, well, I wasn't definitive about us being friends. Is it any wonder that so many people off the back of these experiences get so confused about what we were and what we weren't? Because the level of invalidation, rationalization, and even gaslighting is off the charts with some of these avoidant attachers, because they're basically telling you, what they want you to hear to just make them feel better. And even in that that breakdown that both of you had, where he's gone cold like a robot, and he's just exiting this entire thing with a new person, making out like, oh, well, we had video sex, as if to say like this was never real between us.
Yeah.
And then on top of that too, making out like you're too emotional, I can't deal with you right now when you're crying. Like, I just sort of think, how invalidating. This guy, you know, George can't handle your feelings. He likely can't handle his own. You know, he can't even accept responsibility and accountability for this. And I will tell you that I mean, I read a letter about this the other day where I do know some dismissive avoidance, the severe ones, and some FAs will do this too, where they just like exit a relationship with a new partner straight away. It's like, instead of actually having the breakup conversation, they're like, oh yeah, I actually met someone new and I'm going to go with them now. And it would be disrespectful to them if we keep chatting. So bye. And it's like, hang on a minute, you've skipped like 10 crucial steps here. You've, one, skipped the fact that you're obviously unhappy in this experience. Two, you haven't tried to work on it to see if this is a fixable thing. Three, instead of having a proper breakup conversation, you've gone off and dated someone new and said, oh, well, it's for their benefit that we don't talk with each other. It's like, well, hang on, where's Fiona's rights in all this? Like, this is so unfair. This is a great example of an avoidant abuse strategy called banishing, which is basically where George is trying to banish Fiona as if that never happened. We weren't a thing. I'm getting rid of you to absolve my guilt and shame. Mm-hmm. And he's just going off with the new person he's with. God knows what kind of relationship style that'll be. But it's just such bullshit for Fiona.
It is. And I think just taking the whole experience we've read so far in the letter from you, Fiona, it's a mind fuck. Like, yeah, it is. Kind of near the end of the letter where it was, we're just friends. Actually, I was kind of indecisive about it, but then going back to being, oh, we're just friends. And people, and again, I know like online, we know that social media can be toxic, and some of the rhetoric that people put out there of, well, they're just friends, just drop it and leave it, or, it wasn't that big of a deal, move on. When somebody is so hot and cold and back and forth and just says, oh, we were friends, but maybe I'm not really sure, that will make anybody feel like they're losing their minds. Again, I am not Fiona. This was not my relationship, and reading it spun my head. It spun my head because again, it was long distance, so that he would rarely have to connect in person and bond in a different way. The moment that there was any feelings coming up for him, he can't handle that. That's vulnerability. He's going to smush it down and say, oh, we're just friends. This is not real. We're just friends. And then right at the end, oh, yeah, by the way, I met somebody new. And because I met somebody new, I only date one person at a time. I know that wasn't explicitly said, but that's this kind of underlying vibe I'm getting. And I'm just going to go now. And that last interaction you had with him, and I know you read it out, and I don't quite remember exactly what was said, but it read like you're sending a business email to a colleague. Like, that's how I talk to my boss, not somebody I have some level of, love and care for. It's like, you send that to your boss. So I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? That's where that frustration is coming in. And I know people have seen me do lives with Ken, or who have seen me for clients. I think this is more of like a different side. Usually I'm very like kind and empathetic. And I do recognize George is living in so much of his own pain. That's why he can't connect. That's why he has to keep a distance. That's why he's not able to just say, I really like Fiona, and because I like her, I can't have a functional relationship with her. This is a man who is living in so much pain. He is, and avoiding accountability, the learned helplessness. Those are there, and just hearing the lack of care from this man, I think in ways that I haven't heard in other letters. Like a lot of the letters I've done with Ken, they're more like fearful avoidant, and there's hot and cold back where they're a little more spicy, but I hear there's more connection, where I think this man really recognizes this is long distance. This is somebody who is in an open relationship. I really can do whatever the fuck I want and not care at all. That's how it's coming off. And I think that's why I feel like I'm a little spicy tonight about it. So it's not that I don't care and recognize that this man is in pain. I am just it's so sad to hear how little care there is, I think, compared to some of the other letters I've read.
I completely agree. I mean, if you're dating someone who's a fearful avoidant, even if they're a little bit dismissive leaning, they often can present with degrees of empathy, degrees of care. They're usually usually they're people who are very into their partners, at least in those hot cycles before their fear of intimacy hits. And I don't think that the kind of people who would really, I mean, they can do all kinds of relationships, but they really do have a bit more warmth to them in those interpersonal moments. And I think with George, the way he talks is almost the way I could imagine a dismissive parent would talk to a child. Oh, we need to, for example, and I'm quoting from a story that I heard the other day, we need to use your room for, other guests because we don't have the money to basically give you a room of your own. So you're just expected to just deal with it as we give this to someone else. It's like, in that example, I'm trying to convey, it's like this idea of like, well, George may have been brought up to basically have just expected that, decisions will be made on his behalf. He has no control over his life. His choice is taken away. He has to put up with it. Too bad for you, George. You can't have your room. Now, of course, this is me providing a fabricated example here, but it's just to say that the way he treats Fiona is very dismissive. It's very much just like, oh, we're going to do this now, and you just have to deal with it because that's just the way things are. And it's so wrong because he's taking away Fiona's choice, her agency, her involvement in this, and it's pure and utter abandonment amongst many other things. There's betrayal in there too. And I think that it's just one of those things where some avoidant attachers, particularly the dismissives, they think that that's just normal behavior. And it's like, you can't just do that to someone because it really messes them up. So let's go back into the final parts of Fiona's letter. And I can't, actually, before we do that, I forgot to even touch on the ghosting aspect of this too. So he goes and goes off with this new person at this particular point in time. Now, having not read like the rest of the letter yet, I don't know if there's he reappears because sometimes, as we know, that can happen. But just very quickly on the ghosting, that's terrible. Like, I mean, at least give Fiona some more closure than that. Like, I mean, you've spent 3 years with her, in this on and off long distance relationship that's open. You at least owe her more words than that.
Exactly. And I will not spoil the ending, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'll let you.
You've read ahead, okay.
I'll let us. I was like, this is like ridiculous. So that ghosting piece, and I'll just kind of quickly add this and then we can get into the end of it. Like, so as this is coming up, now I kind of feel like I can take this and tie it back into the letter earlier because we're kind of like, well, who defined the relationship? What's kind of going on here? And how we just kind of like, again, ghosted, just like faded off into the distance. That it's the level of abandonment and neglect is like 15 out of 10. So this is just my perspective reading this letter. At the end of it, I don't really hear much substance to really make a relationship. This was meeting somebody who did a great job of, again, I know it's not intentional, but like almost kind of, sucking you in because they were there at one point, right? It was love bombing. And then once it got too much for them and they cannot handle their feelings well on a good day, they started to pull back. And it was like, I was here and then I'm just going to constantly neglect and abandon you. And literally, this isn't breadcrumbs. This is like microscopic, like molecules of something to try and grasp at. There is hardly anything there. And it's the least I've ever seen so far in these letter readings of a partner, and then they just went away. So it's like having your heart broken over and over and over again and just waiting for him to come. The level of neglect and abandonment from this man blows my mind. And I think that's why, again, I'm feeling a little spicy about it tonight, is because this was just, I'm going to tell you I like you, but not really. And then just be neglectful and just abandon you the entire time we are together. And then I'm going to leave when I feel like it. The most disrespectful, insulting thing, that is one of the most disrespectful and insulting things you can do to somebody, in my opinion.
I completely agree. And I'll return to you if I feel like it as well too. And I'll change the narrative and say,
yes,
I wasn't definitive about us being friends. I'm just, let's hold on. Let's maybe change what I said earlier, because I can rewrite the narrative for us. It's like, no, you can't, bro. You can't just rewrite reality to suit how you feel. So let's continue. It's been 2 years since that last conversation. I've been in no contact, removed him from my socials almost a year in, because he continued to... Classic. He continued to watch my stories and never removed me for himself. I've continued with therapy so I can better understand myself, how my background led me to expect things from someone who did not have the capacity to show up for me. I also sense that on paper, I'm someone who he could be emotionally unavailable with, but eventually he'd abruptly change his behavior and push me away without explanation. So at some point, I became uncomfortable for him because I expected consistency in communication or things that were just outside of his zone of comfort. Every time we got close, it was too much for him. Every time he'd push me away, he'd say that if I didn't like the situation, we couldn't be friends or stay in touch together. He also said that he'd understand and I should leave as if he was hoping I would. And I could see now how I was hooked to the idea that maybe he valued me and our relationship to keep me in his life. This was a push-pull that created a hell of intermittent reinforcement that was extremely hard to recover from. Absolutely. Recently, I realized I needed to stand up for myself. I sent him an email saying that I understand he had his reasons, but his actions hurt me. I explained my decisions and wished him the best. He didn't respond. This validated to me that there is some avoidance to him because someone secure in his decisions does not disappear like he did or avoids giving him closure. Can I just take a minute here? Fiona, did you at one point honestly believe that this man had any semblance of secure attachment? Like, this is a guy who's ghosted you, who's defined this relationship depending on how he's feeling. Now, I'm not trying to say that you weren't within your rights to think this at one point in time. I know some people, I work with a lot of people where I can see the forest from the trees, and they're often like, oh, am I, like, was this person secure? Was I just being too needy? Hell no. Like, no to both. You absolutely weren't being needy, and this guy is certainly not secure. But anyways, just to finish this off, because someone secure in his decisions does not disappear like he did or avoids giving closure. After sending this email, I finally felt more at peace. Good for you. Let's pause here because there's a little bit more. There's some Q&A. But before we go into that, Megan, what are your thoughts on all of this as it rounds out here?
Not for a moment in any way, shape, or form was this man secure.
No
Not
way.
even a little bit. In your dreams, literally, that's really the only time. So again, like I say that cheeky, like I said, this letter has left me kind of spicy tonight. So that's not an insult on you, Fiona. And Ken, you said it, and I will say this with my clients too. And I know that I've been in that experience too, where we can only see the trees amongst our own forest. So when we are in a relationship, whether you want to call them rose-colored glasses or just trying to be optimistic and hopeful, because we don't go into relationships thinking somebody's going to treat us like a piece of shit, or someone's going to be neglectful, or someone's going to be abusive. We don't consciously enter relationships that way. And what will keep us that hope of like, maybe they'll come around or this will get better is the hope, or the intermittent reinforcements of good moments. So because you had some moments where you felt like he was there and he was trying to connect with you, all right, and then he just faded away, just fuck off again. And those moments of him there, that's what will keep us there. So I know I was like, this man's not secure, on paper it looks obvious, but when we are in it, we don't see that. And that's that is a big thing that will keep people stuck in these types of dynamics. So there's that's not in any way shaming or ridiculing you or being like, how did you not see it? That's what happens. But looking at it from the outsider perspective, man was not secure, and he did you dirty, Fiona. Like, that level of neglect, and I am really glad to hear you are in therapy, and you're just trying to learn more about yourself so that you don't repeat these types of behaviors. Like, this man was so disrespectful in ways that, again, just with the letters I have done with Ken, was different than the other two letters. I think we looked at both of them. Were probably fearful leaning, or anxious leaning, dismissive, avoidance. The level. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. That's what yes.
I knew what you meant.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. This man, the level of neglect. And when we look at trauma, like, we actually talk about this, when a hallmark of childhood trauma, and I will also say this is such a huge, this is a huge marker for adults who are in trauma, is neglect. And that's emotional neglect, that's physical neglect. That's why I'm just sitting a lot with this letter, is because of how neglectful he was. And that is a form of abuse. That's a form of abuse. It's not like a hill I'm going to die on. That is what we talk about when we look at abusive relationships, is neglect. And that's what I'm hearing from this man. And that's also why I think I am mad for you. So I don't know if that answered your question, Ken, but that is really how I see all this coming together. This was not secure. He did you so badly, and you were just wanting something, you were hoping for something different, because again, we don't look for partners that we expect to hurt us consciously most of the time. And I'm hearing that was the case for you, and that clearly never happened, Fiona. So
yeah, I completely agree with you, Megan. Like, to be fair to you, Fiona, most clients I work with will often have a moment of being like, was he secure? Did I miss that opportunity to really connect with him? Because, like, when you're in it, right, I'm sure that, that George, he might have been the kind of guy where when he's telling you, oh, I can't give you this relationship the way you want it, I can't give you direct communication, I can't be consistent for you, he's being pretty upfront, right? It's very easy for a lot of us, particularly I think now, as a gay man saying this, please take this with a pinch of salt, but like, I think in heteronormative dating culture, a man who is saying what he can and can't provide for you is a man who seemingly knows what he wants, which is ironic for this guy, because he was very inconsistent about what he wanted with you throughout parts of this. But, he's at least at one point communicating quite clearly with you. I can't do direct communication. I can't be in a committed relationship. I can't do X, Y, Z. So, you might think, oh, this guy's actually pretty clear about what he seems to want. However, there's plenty of evidence to show, with the power of hindsight, that he actually didn't really know what he wanted at all, that it was really based on how he was feeling in the moment. And just to put a comparison on it, someone who's secure would, to be completely honest, like, even if they are doing an open relationship, which, someone secure might do an open relationship, that's fine, there would need to be way, way more communication, definitely way more intimacy in terms of, spending time together. Because when you start to deviate from monogamous relationships, if you're doing open, if you're doing long distance, you need more boundaries and guidelines for how you're going to navigate it, because feelings get hurt. And in this style, it felt like yours got hurt quite severely at the expense of, George's enjoyment for this experience as well too. I'm not saying it was designed that way to make him feel like, moustache twirling, Machiavellian plot stirrer. I just think that it was one of those things where this was ideal for him. He doesn't like closeness, he likes distance. This was ideal for him. And there was something here at the end that you mentioned that I just wanted to tap onto. Oh, this was it. I am so proud of you, like beyond proud, that you actually emailed and said the way you treated me was not okay. I know so many coaches and therapists will tell you, don't reach back out, closure is what you make of it for yourself. Not in this case. In my experience, when you're dealing with avoidant attachers, I will die on this hill. Please, if you feel called to it, and do this when you're at a stage when you're ready for it, not because you want them back again, not because you're trying to have, fantasy style closure where everything's peaceful. You're not going to get that likely. I am a big believer in you should at some point articulate how this behavior made you feel, how it hurt you, because that is you reclaiming your voice off the back of this experience. It is you reclaiming a sense of assertiveness off the back of this, because it really does help you internally to feel like what I went through was not okay. That's you reclaiming your truth. So I'm a big believer in that. So good on you for doing that. I'm glad that it helped put maybe another nail in the coffin of that experience.
And Ken, I was going to say, I also want to echo that. I talk about that with my clients in this coaching space. I talk about that with clients when they come into my office for therapy. I talk about if you feel like that this is going to help you reclaim your sense of power, do it. But there is, I'm going to call it a condition. If you do decide to do it, you did do it, Fiona. So for other people listening, sending that letter, when you send it, you have to be prepared for either no response or a response that would be like the worst possible thing that they could say. When you send that letter, it's not for the intent for you to like get back at them. It's for you to find closure. It's for you to say, I am closing the book on this. I was able to tell them how they affected it, not to try and get back at you, X person, and make you feel bad. Like that's not the goal. The goal is for you to find peace, and you have to be okay with whatever response comes of it. So if anybody listening, watching this live, listening to it later on Spotify as a podcast, you write that letter, it's for yourself to find that last bit of closure. It doesn't mean you have to, but if it's something you need to do, you can do it. And again, 99% of them have some level of awareness of their behaviors. And so when they look at that letter, they're not going to it may feel like you're talking to a brick wall, but they're going to read it. And even if it's a little bit, they're going to take some of that in and they're going to go, I really hurt this person. So they are going to read it and have some reaction to it. Does that mean they're going to, they might compartmentalize it. They might try to project it. Like they might not receive it well, but they'll read it. And again, there will be some level of them recognizing, I really hurt this person and I don't feel good about it. Would that be fair to say, Ken?
I completely agree with everything you said. In my experience, I don't think I've ever seen, I would rarely see, some respectful, response off the back of a lot of this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that, with one of those things, I think it's one thing I want to say about this is, in terms of the responses from the avoidance, it pretty much mimics what you've probably described. I've heard no response from a lot of them. And you've got to accept the fact that that's it. That's, if they're not willing to give you a response, that says a lot about them. And on that note, if it were me, look, I haven't always behaved the best in dating. I don't think anyone has. We're all, we're all human and we all, are figuring things out as we go and trying to improve. Most of us. I would like to believe that if any of my exes truly felt that I had done a blindsided breakup to them that devastated them and they wanted to reach out to me to explain how my behavior impacted them, I would genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, if they weren't an abuser, say, I am sorry for how my behavior impacted you, because regardless of my intention, I know how traumatizing it can be, and I do not want to ever have that impact on anyone ever again. That's why I'm in therapy, to work on this stuff, if that's true. And it's because I know how it really makes people feel, and it is truly an abusive, behavior that can occur. And I'm so sorry that I did that to you, because I know how, traumatizing that is. That's how I would say it. Not that I've had reason to do that. But, the point is that I think that there is a difference between someone who can empathize with their behavior and understand how it might have impacted you versus someone who's willing to turn away from it. Or, as you said, another response that we often see is compartmentalizing. They'll just be like, they might just be like, oh, cool story, bro or girl, and just leave it at that and then go off as if it wasn't such a big deal. I did hear one story where, to my client's credit, they got a full 7-hour conversation explaining the ins and outs of what happened. Sometimes the avoidant attachers will actually be the ones to initiate and come back and be like, I'm so sorry, I did what I did. I don't know what happened. I just shut down, or I did this, or I did that. The responses can vary. But at the end of the day, you know, the key thing you have to do, I think, more than anything else, is how does their response make you feel, and do what you may off the back of it. But if they are coming back to you with intensity and lots of apologies, I will tell you that they're usually not apologizing for you. They're usually almost apologizing to themselves and looking for you to forgive them. And they've got to learn to forgive themselves. That's a self piece of work that they've got to do. So yeah, all in all, I'd say responses can vary.
Yes, and I'll add this last part, and we could probably move on with the letter. And I big reason why when they apologize, it's not to you, it's for them, or even, you know, they don't want to just really sit and confront their own feelings, is because of the low level of empathy that they have. And a lot of people think you are born empathetic, and you're not. You are taught to be empathetic. Empathetic is a learned skill. And in order to have that skill, we have to be in touch with our emotions. Being able to be empathetic is a marker of emotional intelligence. And if we have really low emotional intelligence, we're not going to be able to empathize with people. Because, and like, actually Brene Brown does a really, really great video. If you want to like type it into YouTube, and empathy versus sympathy, Brene Brown,
Yeah.
It's really cute too. It has like, you'll see like, it's, you know, a bear in a hat and a shirt, and you got like a fox in a dress, and they're talking about going and being with somebody. When you are able to empathize with somebody, you're able to relate to just their emotions. You know, you, like an example she gave in it was, somebody may have said, I had a miscarriage, and the person's like, well, at least you can get pregnant. That's not empathizing with somebody. Being able to empathize, and maybe, you know, you heard that from somebody and said, well, you know, I don't have the parts to be able to get pregnant, but I can imagine, but I've experienced feeling such intense sadness in other areas of my life, or grief. So I can relate to the feelings of grief or sadness. It's about being able to like know what it's like to really feel something, and then take that and translate it and move it into another person. So if we don't recognize and sit with our own emotions, we can't do that for another person. And when we can't do that for ourselves or another person, we can't be empathetic. So that like those cold responses too, or no response, or like, this letter had too many paragraphs and you spelt this word wrong, is because they're uncomfortable and they don't know how to just sit and recognize they've hurt somebody, because having to sit with their own hurt is too much for them.
Yep. And some of them will, you know, say things like, what do you mean I hurt you? We weren't even together for that long, or this or that. Like, that's
yeah, exactly. And that's back to like, I can't sit with how I feel when I'm hurt, so I can't give that to somebody else. I can't pass that. I can't put myself in somebody else's shoes to feel that. People also, but like, again, if you have, even people listening, if you feel like you have really low emotional intelligence, or you don't have a lot of empathy, empathy is a learned skill. People can come, access therapy, go to counseling, some coaching spaces do it, to learn how to build your level of emotional intelligence, to build empathy. So all hope is not lost, but it's a lot of work, and it's deeply uncomfortable, and you can do it.
Yep.
So there's also that as well.
Yes, completely agree with everything you said. So just rounding out now with the last part of Fiona's letter. Her question for us is, if you have any ideas specific to my situation and from an attachment perspective on handling thoughts from my inner critic, the what if monster, I sometimes struggle with knowing whether he likes me or not, or if I was a placeholder. Although I have no details, as far as I know, he's in a relationship for 2 years now with someone new. So maybe he can communicate when he wants to. I don't know whether, you know, he's actually capable of commitment, or whether he's just, you know, wasn't direct with me. While I know our relationship was less conventional, I still perceived a level of intimacy that seems hard to fake. There was a very evident and clear attraction from the start, and things didn't escalate quickly or feel impulsive as we spent time together that was significant, getting to know each other before anything happened. So it felt more emotionally tangled than it appears on paper, but sometimes I still doubt my experience and how it felt. However, I might still be too close to this situation to see it clearly. Once again, thanks for you for reading this out, for the validation, and for everything you do for this community. You're very welcome. Okay, so I'm going to work my way backwards from that, because there were 3 things that I took away from that, which is 1, did he really ever care? Was he ever really into you? And then 2 and 3 are the what if monster and the inner critic. So for the sake of maybe simplifying it, here's my thoughts on this. I don't think this was a case of he just wasn't that into you. I think that my reason is that he seemed to be very unsure partway through about how to define you in this experience. If I didn't truly like someone, there ain't no ambiguity about my feelings towards them. It's just a flat line of like, nah, I'm just not that into you. This wouldn't have gone on for as long as it did if he truly wasn't that into you. And yes, I know some people love to bleat out, well, feelings can change. Not like that. Like, you know, that's not how that works. So in my opinion, keen to hear your thoughts on this, Megan, in just a second. My answer is, I think based on what we know with dismissive avoidance, and I am saying dismissive avoidant, I truly believe that this was a case of fear of intimacy, and fear of intimacy is more than likely to activate when there is a depth of connection present versus when there's not. So that's my 2 cents on this. What are your thoughts on this, Megan?
I was going to say I agree, and we're not saying that to, like, you know, try and make you feel better, because I can imagine, I said you are in a lot of emotional pain. I also echo Ken, because that does go back to, if you don't like somebody in that level of intimacy, you don't like them and you move on. Or sometimes you don't like somebody and you stay friends, but it doesn't then move back into these places of like intimate moments, or, you know, I actually like you, but I'm not really sure. Like we don't do that. That if it moves to friendship and that relationship moves into an intimate relationship, that's a slow progressive, you know, that's slow and progressive movement in it. And it's consistent.
Yes.
And it's consistent too. So we don't go, I like you, we're friends. I really like you. I think I like you, we're friends. Oh my God, I like you. Peace, bitch, I'm out of here. And we just like fade off in the distance. That's not how this works. So it's a steady climb, and it's that consistency piece. So the fact that he's back and forth, that level of ambiguity is because he's not okay to sit and feel his feelings, and that's huge with somebody that has a dismissive avoidant or dismissive leaning fearful avoidant attachment style, because they dismiss, like they dismiss their emotions, they dismiss your experience, they dismiss their experience because emotions were not welcome. It's too painful for them to sit in. And also the fact that he's watching your stories, he's like, I'm going to just fade away, but I'm going to watch your stories. A healthy way, when we walk out of somebody's life, we don't hang one foot out the door. We don't do that. We fully close the door, and that means we don't look at stories on social media. We don't sporadically send them letters. We don't reach out to their sister or their parent or their friend and be like, or their hairdresser or that one. So how's Fiona doing? How's she doing? We don't do that. Like we walk out, we're done. So the fact that he's like hovering around, he is a ghost that's just haunting you. Oh my God. Like I think it's still like fresh off of Halloween to still say it's like spooky season right now for this. The fact that they're hanging around, that tells me he's curious, and there's some level of like, how's she doing?
Yeah.
I wish she was still there. And another thing too is that the level of it's late at my time. I want to call it a fantasy, like this fantasy of like, maybe this is what the relationship could have looked like if we were still together. So they'll kind of hang around and they'll hoover what's going on in your stories, or I'm gonna like accidentally bump into your friend who I know, goes to this coffee shop every Saturday just to check in, or, oh, I bumped into you, how's so-and-so doing? Because it's almost like a limerence or a fantasy of still trying to, in some way, just like connect and still feel like they're with you. But again, actually being with you is too much. So that's why I also think, nope, this was somebody who did like you, and they just can't sit with that. They can't.
And also think about like this too, the amount of effort this guy is going to move on from you and still maintain watching you and your stories, like those two things just don't coexist. Like as you said, Megan,
no.
You know, when we move on from someone, there ain't no looking back. It's indifference. You're like, peace out, bye, that's it. And so I love what you were saying, because it really is that point that we're not turning back and being like, let's look at them through our socials. I don't give a shit what any of my exes are up to on this, like on their socials. Like I'm like, great, wish you all the best. Hope you go to therapy, you know, for those that need it. But you know, like I just sort of think that it's very easy for a lot of us in these experiences to have, as Fiona was asking me about, the what if monster and also the inner critic. And I guess to delineate those two really quickly, because you've always got to run it. I know it's late for you, Megan, is what if monster is like, oh, but what if they were secure? What if they, you know, didn't actually love me? And inner critic would be more like, well, if you weren't so needy for communication, then maybe George would still be around. That berating voice in our head. Those two parts of ourselves are coming up because you don't have a lot of answers to this situation. You also are in a situation where you are trying to make sense of a confusing experience. And it would suggest to me, when I hear that, my brain goes, okay, if I was to address both of those parts respectively with a client in session, like I can't do this with you, Fiona, is I would probably sit down with, you know, my therapist or myself. I would write out like a script with my inner critic being like, okay, what's my inner critic saying? It's saying, you know, I wasn't good enough for George. Okay, where is the evidence that I wasn't good enough for him? Did he say I wasn't good enough for him? Is this a story that I'm making up in my head? We really need to, this is why I love these letters so much, because what you often demonstrate is the facts. And it's really important to go back to the facts of these experiences, because it doesn't sound like George was saying to you, I don't like you. He didn't say, you know, I don't appreciate you. I don't think we're a match. If anything, he was displaying very confusing behavior, which caused you to feel unworthy and lacking in enoughness, so to speak. So my short answer on this is, I think it's really important to always return to the facts and try and assert that against any argument you might have in your head where you're telling yourself, I could have done more, I should have done more, what if X, what if Y? Because at the end of the day, a lot of that, you know, panic we have in our head about what happened, it's actually past trauma stuff where we're trying to make sense of confusing people's behavior. We're trying to bend ourselves like pretzels to get along with people who are being abusive, when we're not really, that's not helping us. But easier said than done. Like, hey, it took me a while to get to the stage where I could do that. But Megan, what are your thoughts on that?
I was going to say, I want to echo what you said. And I do hear also that he did love you and cared about you. And he earlier in the letter, he even said, when I start to catch feelings, I walk away. When I start to get close to somebody, I walk away, and that's what he did to you. So he did care, but he treated you like a placeholder.
Yes.
That's how I see it, because again, of how the level of neglect and abandonment, and just, I'm gonna like swoosh in when I feel like, and just, you know, again, swoosh out when I want to leave, and eventually just fade out and ghost. And the person, I think this is maybe also spilling to the second question, but the person that he's now in this relationship with for 2 years, like, I guarantee you, Fiona, this is somebody who didn't put expectations on him, who didn't expect anything of him. Said, you could just do whatever the fuck you want. You can do whatever you want. That is the type of relationship that he's going to sustain himself in, because there's no expectations, doesn't have to get close and vulnerable. He can do whatever he wants and not have anybody question or challenge or try to share what they want and need. He can get his cake and eat it too. That's what he feels like. And that is not a healthy, or I'm going to say it's not a healthy relationship. And I'm also going to say it's probably not a functional relationship. Just because two people are together, just because two people are in a relationship, two people are sleeping together, doesn't mean it's functional. I can't begin to imagine the neglect that they have with, I bet you that this new relationship that he is in is him saying, well, I'm just going to do my own thing, and she's saying, well, I'm going to do my own thing, and we're only going to come together for the fun stuff, for the exciting stuff, for the novelty stuff, to maybe have sex, and that's it. And it's floofy, fluffy, no expectations. You feel like you get your cake and eat it too. And those are people who are not happy on the inside. Those are not happy, healthy people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. My last piece on this as I round out, Fiona, is just to say that I love what Megan said, which is, you know, if you're ever doubting whether you're a placeholder, I'd say, I don't think he was intentionally trying to make you a placeholder. I think he could only make you a placeholder because of his capacity issues. But his capacities aren't really the problem. The problem is that he misled you. The problem is the way he undercommunicated, the way he was hot and cold, the way he was, you know, as this person says, being a validation seeker. You know, I don't doubt the intent. Like, this is the thing. I'm very strong on this because it really has helped me. We have to own our truth, and our truth includes our intuition. If you felt like on that first night when you met, it was phenomenal, it was phenomenal. Don't doubt yourself for feeling like, oh, you know, we never really had, you know, anything between us. It was just, you know, I'm just being delusional. That's inner critic thinking. And I see a lot of people do this to themselves where they're like, oh, no, we just weren't that in love. They just weren't that into me. That is an avoidance strategy that a lot of people who even may not have an avoidant attachment like to do to themselves to avoid feeling disappointed or hurt or trusting their own feelings and judgment. And I see it happen a lot where people are like, oh, I'm Delulu. I clearly, you know, this person was never in love with me. It's like, no. Like, this person spent significant emotional time and investment in you, but they had capacity issues too. So all I will say, just as we're rounding this little piece up, is to say, this is a really big call, not just to you, Fiona, but to so many people. For the love of God, your truth, your feelings are your reality. At the end of the day, if you don't, you know, you don't have to accept another person's version of that. You're allowed to be like, this is how I feel. This is what I experienced. There may be some discrepancies between what you experienced. Wonderful. But I truly believe this is my truth. It's what feels comfortable to me. I personally don't feel like I'm bypassing. And believe me, you will feel like if you're bypassing, because usually you'll have a lot of, you know, feelings come up that try and get out of you at one point or another. Compartmentalization usually is never strong enough for, you know, suppressed emotions to go away. So I can assure you, like, put it like this. I often say to my clients, okay, if you really want to test the theory, just ask yourself, just be like, okay, say to yourself, my ex never loved me. See how that sits with you for a hot second. Because I can guarantee you, if you sit with it, you're probably going to have this inner part of you that goes, nah, I don't believe that. I don't think that was entirely true. Now, you may find it hard to also say they love me because their behavior was less than loving, but maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle, which is what you were saying, Megan, before, which is, you know, he showed up, in this case, George, he showed up, he was intense, he was intensely loving to the best of his abilities, but he could only treat me like a placeholder because of his capacity issues.
Yes. Yep. And there's there's an analogy we can use. We talk about our capacity for love and care and affection. It's the pint or the teacup, if folks are familiar with that. And there's so folks that are really loving and caring and are more in touch with their emotions. And this is what we kind of the goal for more healthier partners. We want to be more of a pint. We have a big cup, we can fill it, and we have enough to then give others. And a teacup, it's not saying that, okay, it's not saying that you're not healthy, but your capacity to give and receive love and to be in touch with those emotions and to reciprocate and be empathetic, that's a little bit smaller. It doesn't mean you're not a healthy partner, you just don't have that much to give. We can, and again, with therapy, with good coaching that's ethically able to help you build those skills, with therapy, can help you to increase you from a teacup to a pint. And when I think about George, when I think about some of the other people, the letters we've gotten in, our own experiences, people that are coming to this page to find some healing and closure and have language put to their experience, the people that we have engaged with have teacup size. But we're at the extreme ends. It's not just like a regular teacup size. It's like if you have a kid or your neighbor and you have to go find Barbie, the Barbie teacups, like that's how big their teacup is like Barbie doll, tiny,
Thimble.
like the smallest raindrop. It's a thimble. It's a little thimble Barbie teacup size amount that they can give. And it's heartbreaking. And Fiona, like everybody here who has experienced that level, even if you yourself have behaved in ways like this to other people and you were at that receiving end, you don't deserve that. It's not, and having to go back to somebody who doesn't change, who consistently behaves that way, it's not worth it. They are not worth it. They're not bad people. They are not monsters, but that having them as a partner and how they treat you, they are not worth it. I also want to leave that there.
And I will finish by saying you can still love them. They are still worthy of
love.
But you've also got to think about how their behavior is ultimately impacting your well-being too. So just around it here, thank you for your letter. A little bit different from some of the ones we've read out before, but got to say, it made for some great conversation today. And Megan, it was so good to see you again and to have you part of this experience. I know obviously we're colleagues, but who work under the same business name, but it's good that we got to do this together too. So just to round out, thank you everyone for being part of this letter reading. We're going to be back again. Well, Megan and I will be back again in the future, obviously, for another one. Yeah. If any of you would like to work with my team, Megan, for instance, is available taking clients at the moment, and we're still obviously going to be operating over, the Christmas, New Year's period and Thanksgiving for those of you that are in the States. And apart from that, that's all the news from me. Megan, did you want to finish off by saying anything?
Yeah, so I'm available for clarity calls. I'm available for coaching calls. Also, I do want to preface this. I don't have my own Instagram page, Facebook page, TikTok page. I just work with Ken. So this page, this is like it's private. You can't see anything anyway. So you don't have anything for us to follow. So if you do want to connect with me, you will only be able to do so like lives, but clarity calls, coaching, that's how you can work and connect with me. I see somebody ask a question, are you US based? I'm actually in Canada, so I'm a Canadian. I'm about 2 hours away from Toronto, but just like Ken, we see people all over the world. I have a lot of US clients right now. So I'm based in Canada, but I can see people anywhere. If you look at my schedule for availability, if it lines up with a time that works for you, it's going to work for me. So yeah.
That's pretty much how I would define it for myself if I wasn't so booked up personally. But that's why you're here, Megan. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope your weekends are starting well for those of you that are on my side of the planet. For those of you that are on Megan's, well, then obviously you're getting there. And we'll see you guys for another letter reading soon. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye. Take care.